This is Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I am Andrew Ridgie, and today I am here with a fantastic guest, partner.
That remains to be seen.
Yes, indeed. Partner and Director of Marketing for the Myriad Restaurant Group, Mr. Tracy Nieporent. And this is really great because I recently had his brother Drew on the show, and this is just going to expand that great conversation because people wanted more and more. And I'm like,
it's an embarrassment of riches, or perhaps just an embarrassment. We'll see what happens.
So this is great. So obviously the restaurant group, it was Tribeca Grill until it recently closed after decades and left an incredible legacy. Nobu. So many other restaurants, and you've done so much within the industry that we're going to talk about. But what was your background before becoming a partner and dealing with all the marketing and the press of all the restaurants? Was it just a dive in, or did something prepare you before that?
I worked in advertising coming out of college at an ad agency in Rochester, New York to begin with. Then coming back down to New York, worked at several places. Major companies like BBDO and NWA was probably my favorite in New York. It was a wonderful ad agency, and the Army was one of its major clients. The Be All You Can Be campaign, I was part of the team that helped to create that campaign. And it was really a feather in the cap of everybody who worked on it. And it was the most successful campaign that was ever done for the military. Long story short, Lieutenant General Maxwell Thurman was the head of the account. He's the guy who would come to the agency, and you always had to be on your game when he came there. You had to present, you had to be buttoned up. He was a very, very demanding guy, but a very fair guy. And they made their recruitment missions all the time under his jurisdiction. Skipping ahead, he later was pulled out, and he was the guy who was responsible for getting Noriega out of Panama.
Oh, wow.
And then, unfortunately, he passed away from leukemia a few years after that. My wife and I were visiting Arlington National Cemetery to visit JFK's grave and also Bobby Kennedy's grave. And we didn't realize that Max Thurman's grave was like right there. And I was very moved because embodied or engraved on his tombstone was Be All You Can Be.
Wow.
That was our campaign on his tombstone. So it made me realize how meaningful what we do can be, that it really can live on forever. People don't normally put advertising slogans, M&M's, melt in your mouth, not your hands. That doesn't get on too many tombstones, but Be All You Can Be did. And so that was incredible. Skipping ahead, my brother had opened Montrachet. He had ambition to open other restaurants. I was interested in maybe doing something different from sticking with advertising in the more conventional sense. And I could see there was opportunities to do marketing in many different areas for many different concepts of restaurants. And that's basically how it started. And, 40 restaurants over 40 years. They weren't all owned. Some of them were consulting assignments, but nonetheless, the work has to be done. The positioning, writing all the materials, getting the press interested, building relationships with press people in the various places.
That's incredible.
And if I had anything that was a good ability of mine, I tried to really build relationships with press people so that I gave more time to them than maybe they would have expected. Mm-hmm. A lot of those relationships exist today that became friendships just because the way we met. Yeah. Even somebody like Roger Clark,
Yeah.
I got up early one day, and I had to be at Tribeca Grill at 6 a.m.
Well, I see you two on Facebook. You're at, the Mets or the Jets or one of these games.
Well, it turns out we have this mutual interest in sports that's very intense, and it allows us to be little kids and really enjoy, look, we want our teams to win, obviously. As a Met and a Jet fan, that has not been an easy accomplishment lately. But it's the camaraderie, it's being together in this situation, having fun. And that's what's most important. If you set yourself up for disappointment, you will be disappointed. You can't guarantee. There's only one team left standing in every sport at the end of the season. If you put all your eggs in that basket, it's going to be very upsetting.
I love when all the guests connect. Your brother Drew's been on the show. Roger Clark's been a guest on the show. You're a guest on the show. And I think going back to what you said initially about, the Be All You Can Be and it being engraved on the tombstone goes to show what marketing and branding, what it can mean, because it's more than just a slogan. It can actually be something that people embody, a belief that drives people for some specific mission. In that case, the military. But when you're talking about the transition into the restaurants, people also connect emotionally to restaurants and to food. So what did you see over the years, within marketing of the restaurants that had been successful? I feel like now everything moves so quickly with social media, and did you post this or did you post that? But obviously it wasn't always like that. So when you talk about how much time you would sit and spend with reporters and journalists. What was the kind of press that you used to drive for the restaurants in the past, and how did you get that publicity and manage it, whether it's good or bad?
Well, it precedes social media.
Yeah.
A lot of the things, if you got a good magazine piece or a good newspaper piece or something on television or on radio. Those are the things that we basically concentrated on. And, if they came to the restaurant, they wanted to shoot food. So we had to arrange it so that the chef could put out the food and we could do it with the right lighting and everything and not disrupt service. And there's a lot of moving parts in a restaurant. And there's a lot of moving parts to setting up a media shoot and publicizing your restaurant. My feeling was that we had a really good product, each of our restaurants. There was integrity in the ingredients and the presentation and the concepts. And so when you have something good to promote, it's a labor of love. And it was just wonderful to be able to articulate what we were trying to do and hopefully do it in a way that the press would see it the same way. Now, there's a whole group of journalists now who come along and they want a free meal and then they want to have editorial independence.
Sure.
And it's like, well, wait a minute, we're paying and then we're hoping for the best. It's just, to me, it's a sleazy kind of way of operating. But unfortunately, the world has changed a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, you can send them a press release and they'll write up something based on the press release. There's not necessarily that desire to make the personal connection.
Yeah.
And I kind of regret that.
Yeah.
We used to do we did a seminar, how to open a restaurant and make it last. And I was responsible for the PR portion of it. And I said, you got to get on the top 10 list. You find the top 10 media people in a market and make sure you have a relationship with them, because when something breaks, they're going to call you for comment. People would say to me, "Oh God, we see you in the press all the time. Wait, who's your firm?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I think my left hand and my right hand, they work together, and we never had a PR firm. We just didn't. But if you were able to be quoted on things, they knew that if they needed you to comment on something, you could articulate it. I like to say I give a good quote.
Yes. Can you be quotable? Well, what about now? And that's so true, because, there was a handful who's like, the New York Times review, which obviously still now carries a lot of weight, or, Michelin stars. But now there's just so many outlets. And like you said, there's influencers where, millions of eyeballs can see you. And it's not necessarily a real review by a true food, writer. So how do you manage? I mean, I guess it makes it a little bit, I don't know if democratic's the right word, but it's more opportunity for other restaurants that may not, be in the spotlight. And I imagine for well-known restaurants, maybe that are used to being written about in the more traditional outlets or covered in the more traditional outlets, there's more opportunity for just like any random person to review you, good, bad, otherwise, get that out there and influence the business.
There's no question about it. In the early days, if we saw a negative response, we would take it very personally. And I would almost try to spend the time to respond back. I hearkened back to Paul Begala and what was the other guy on the Clinton campaign? But they would do the rapid response. And so I thought, okay, the problem is after a while, it becomes ridiculous because there's just too many comments. And, listen, 99 people may say wonderful things about you, and the 100th person mugs you, and that's what you take home at night. You can't do that.
Let's talk about Restaurant Week. So you and I both serve on the board at NYC Tourism Conventions, formerly NYC & Co., which is the city's destination marketing agency, tourism organization, which runs and manages Restaurant Week. And you were the chair of Restaurant Week for years.
17 years.
Wow. And that's really, can you give actually just a little bit of history on Restaurant Week, like how it came about? Because now there's like Restaurant Weeks all over the globe, very localized, this kind of restaurant week, that kind of
That's
restaurant
right.
week. But New York City Restaurant Week is the OG.
It started in 1992, and I remember being at some meetings, and I remember a meeting at up at the Rainbow Room and with Tim Zagat and Joe Baum and all the legendary people of that time. The Democratic Convention was coming to town, and they wanted something that would excite people in the city. And they said, let's do a week of restaurant meals, 3 courses for $19.92, and see.
1992?
Yeah, for 1992. And lo and behold, it did very well, just as a lunch program. And this continued on. Then it was 1993, 1994, and I'm on the committee. And I just felt at some point, you can't just keep going up a penny a year. It's a law of diminishing returns. You have to freshen it up in some ways. It went on for many, many years. In 2004, I was coming for a meeting, and Christine Nicholas called me and said, "Can you come a few minutes early? Danny and I want to talk to you." Danny Meyer. So I wondered, maybe they had something they wanted to push in the meeting, and they wanted to get me on board. And they called me to the side and they said, "Listen, you do a wonderful job. You contribute well in all the meetings. We want you to take over as the chair. Danny has to move on, but he feels that you would be a good successor to him." And I looked at them and I was like, "Well, thank you. That's not what I expected when I went there."
Yeah.
But lo and behold, that was the start of 17 years. And a lot of meetings and a lot of different regimes that came through at NYC and Company, which is now NYC Tourism and Conventions. But my feeling was that we should have a dinner too. And we should also lengthen the program. And we should also have a winter program, not just a summer program. All these things faced obstacles. All these things, we're going to bastardize it. And I said, look, Macy's doesn't just have a Christmas sale. They have, they have a July 4th sale. They even do the fireworks.
I think that's like the marketing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, why are we giving? We can't give enough of a good thing to people.
Sure.
And plus, the menus you have in the summertime are different than the menus in the wintertime. In the summertime, you get a good gazpacho. In the wintertime, a nice hearty onion soup.
Yeah.
It's
and traditionally for a lot of restaurants, after the holidays in the winter, it's a slow time. And during the summer, it can be a slow time for many restaurants too.
Right.
So you're also driving traffic to the restaurants when they otherwise may not have it.
Well, I felt we could do that well and also create meaningful experiences for our guests. Not just to give them a meal that was less expensive, but also something that they would remember. Because I always like to say that some of the most memorable times in your life are with your family, your friends, and your colleagues at a meal. And, by and large, most restaurants who have participated have taken that to heart. Some don't. Some act like it's an inconvenience and we do it because we have to do it. And, the staff hates it and blah, blah, blah. And that may be true in some cases. But in most cases, at the end of the night, when people have more money in their pocket, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
And something doesn't last all these years by being bogus. It has to be something that resonates with people.
Well, so what do you think in that, though? Because, people always reach out to me and they're like, want to put together some sort of promotional campaign to help restaurants, to help nightlife. What do you think it was originally? And I think through all these years that have allowed Restaurant Week to sustain its popularity and its success for so many restaurants.
It was the quality of the restaurants initially that, you could have access to places that a lot of people maybe didn't have access to. So I think that was the original lever that got people in the door. And before you do something, there's nothing before it. So you look at it now and say, is it all that an original idea? Well, it's not, because it's being done everywhere now, in every town, in every nook and cranny.
Sometimes it's just filling a void. Every idea doesn't have to be a brilliant idea, but you're just the first to do something that makes sense.
There's great food all over the country. There's no doubt about it. We've had restaurants in San Francisco and then, Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, all over the world. But New York is still the greatest restaurant city in the world for the sheer variety of all the different cuisines that we have here. Yeah. It's an international fest of food. And you can go through the 5 boroughs of New York and never leave New York's environs and travel the world. Yeah. That's a very unique thing. And that's a very good thing. And it's something that makes us attractive to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. New York City, people forget how important tourism is. That we don't have industry here. We don't manufacture things. We don't have factories. We're not making things. What we have to offer is our restaurants, our museums, our theaters, our sports teams. These are things that bring people here. The culture of entertainment, hospitality, those are the things that are meaningful. And sometimes people live here say, tourism, why do we, they clog up the streets and all. Well, guess what? You want to pay for a lot of things in this city. You need these people to come here. And you have to welcome them and make sure that they're coming often. And especially, not just domestic tourists, but foreign international tourists who we've been scaring away lately because they stay here longer and they spend more money.
I had this conversation. So Julie Coker, who's not the new, because it's been over a year now, president of NYC Tourism, was on the show, and we were talking about the economic factors of tourism and how particularly international visitors, they come, as you said, they stay longer, they spend more. Obviously, we love domestic tourists as well, but there's so much culture, so much food, so many things that people come to see. And tourism is one of those things that's actually an investment. When I look at all the things the city and state of New York spend money on, most of them are just expenses. They're expenses to clean the streets and do all of this other work, but they're expenses. Tourism is actually something that gives us a return on the investment because every dollar we invest, it brings people here who spend money and, generate more economic activity to help fund all of these other essential services that are just expenses. So we really need to continue to have our lawmakers, which I know through NYC Tourism, you've been doing, and even things like Restaurant Week, help draw people in or go out when maybe they otherwise weren't. So they're important. What did you see at your restaurant? Because you had, between, like a Tribeca Grill to a Nobu, those are both restaurants that, New Yorkers go to, but that people from all over go to. So what was like your experience just welcoming people locally, but from around the world? I mean, the interactions you must have had with people over the years is incredible.
I always felt that if I walked around at night and I looked in the window at each of our restaurants, and at one point in Tribeca, we had like 5 places that were up and running. And I see that these people all could have eaten anywhere. They could have chosen any place to dine out that night, and they chose you. And that's kind of a sacred trust. It's like they put their trust in us that we're going to give them a good experience, a meaningful experience. That I always took that to heart. I always felt that that's wonderful. It's not just a business. It's basically every night people are getting memories. They're going to like a memory machine, and we're helping to provide that. And I think that's terrific.
I know.
I mean, what a nice business to be in. It's nurturing. When people talk about the things that are important to them, dining is really very important.
Well, it's the thing that everyone connects to, it's the social aspect. It doesn't matter what industry you're from, you're in, it's the thing that brings people together and that they can kind of unite around.
Well, what backs that up, when I was in advertising, I met other clients, and advertising people meet advertising people. But in the culinary world, when you meet people, you meet everybody because everybody eats.
Yeah, very true.
Whether it's athletes or whether it's politicians or musicians or whoever, they all at some point hopefully make it to your door. And in some cases, you get to meet these people and break bread with them and really find out a lot about what makes them tick.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned to you, Bruce Springsteen, a lot of times we provide food, sometimes backstage. And through the years, we had an event, the Kristen Ann Carr Fund, and he would play that event quite often. At the end of the tour in 2004, I think it was at Shea Stadium. And they'd been on tour for like 2 years. And they came back and they had their after party at Montrachet. And it was really exciting. And Sting was there, We had to take all the tables out and have this area so people could stand up, and it was past hors d'oeuvres. And there were some banquettes where people could sit. And at the end of the night, I got to talk to Danny Federici and to Clarence Clemens. These are guys that are gone now. We saw them in there letting their hair down after 2 years on the road.
Yeah.
And so they were all sitting on a banquette. And, next day they're going to all go to different places. Niels Lofgren's going to go back to Arizona, and Clarence is going to go to Florida, and Bruce is going to go to, Colts Neck or wherever the hell he was going. And he said, we've been on the road 2 years, played a lot of songs, played a lot of concerts, made a lot of people happy. That's good. That's good. I thought, God, I just got to watch Bruce Springsteen say goodbye to the troops.
Yeah.
It's like, Washington saying goodbye to the generals at Francis Tavern or something, And then it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, the lights beginning to come up outside. And it turns out there were paparazzi outside, which, we took a picture by the bar in the front there together. We're all kind of like together. And I thought, man, this is like a pinch me moment. How does this happen? A couple of kids from New York growing up in one bedroom in
Peter
Cooper. And now, we got Bruce Springsteen, there. And it was the same thing when the Rangers, beat the Devils to go to the finals of the Stanley Cup in '94. They had a lot of the hierarchy of the Rangers came to the Tribeca Grill that night. And so these things happen that are just kind of like amazing.
Yeah, you pinch yourself, and they happen in restaurants.
Yeah, and they have respect for what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously respect what they do, but there's kind of a mutual respect, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, I remember. So, how many years was Tribeca Grill open for?
35.
35 years. So,
35
well,
years.
thank you. So you invited me. We had a wonderful farewell dinner with some of your family and friends. So anyway, so the farewell dinner at Tribeca Grill, we were there together. Kenny Albert, the sportscaster, and his wonderful wife, which Kenny's incredible because he is live action broadcaster for multiple different sports, which is
he's done everything.
Yeah.
His father obviously was Marv Albert. So the connection to Madison Square Garden, where we actually have a burger there, that we grew up at the Garden. Yeah. Going back to the old Garden, where I got the GO seats, up in the upper level, and literally, that old building on 49th between 49th and 50th Street. On 8th Avenue. That was the Garden that we grew up with originally. And then, so Kenny is he's amazing.
Yeah.
It's very hard to make social dates with him because he's always somewhere.
Yeah.
I'll turn on the TV. There he is. He's doing a football game. Or next night he's off in British Columbia doing a hockey game.
Yeah, but it's so nice when you do get together. We can do it in restaurants. And I think it's amazing because you mentioned, obviously, the burger restaurant at the Garden, but you've done a lot of food. I feel like you are, by the way, we're not getting into it too much right now, but your knowledge of sports is like photographic. We were at a Mets game not too long ago, and I think for the first eight innings, you're just talking and able to pull these stats from decades ago, and it's incredible. You're like a true fan.
I like the human aspect of it. And I'm not one of these people who sits in the stands and yells at the players, because I realize how hard it is. I went to Mets Dream Camp, 2003, and you're on a real field in Port St. Lucie. You have a uniform and everything, and they put you through your paces, and you're running around, and you're playing at least 2 games a day, and you're playing with former Met players. And my Clint Hurdle was the head of the camp. My manager was Tim Tuffle, and but the guy that I really became friends with to this day, we're very, very good friends, is Ron Swoboda.
Wow.
And Ron was, one of the great 69 Mets. And also Art Shamsky, I'm very friendly with. And these are people with tremendous character. And we got into conversations during that week, not just about baseball, but just about life.
Yeah.
And when it ended, Ron said to me, I come to New York periodically. I live in New Orleans, but I'd love to get together. And I said, well, it's great because we have restaurants. We can do that, And he, oh, terrific. And so we've done that when he comes to town. When I came to New Orleans, I happened to have tickets when the NBA All-Star Weekend was there several years ago. And I took Ron to the game. And Adam Silver said, Ron Swoboda? It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But you become friends with people, and it's not because of of what they did, it's because of who they are. I found through the years, he's such a good person. And we talk about everything. We talk about what's going on in the world. And sometimes it gets back to baseball too, but this is what's important,
Yeah.
So when you start to look at, athletes, performers, they're all human beings. They're all going out there doing the best they can to put on a good show. And I don't like to judge it. Like some of these fans today, or you listen to sports radio and it's anger. Get rid of this guy, get rid of that guy. Like, they don't have families.
Yeah.
They don't have feelings, they're disposable parts. Unless they please me, they're not worth very much.
Well, that's part of the culture now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Do you think, talking about performers, talking about athletes, and talking about restaurants, do you find just through your relationships that maybe there's any common threads or like common traits between people who are successful athletes and people who are successful running restaurants?
I think it comes down to character. I really do. It's there's a certain gene, there's a certain gear in people that is nurturing and caring. And if you have that in sports, because you realize that you very rarely can do it alone. You need to do well with your teammates. And it's similar with a restaurant. We have to have a team. Yeah. Everybody has to row in the same direction. We don't have to necessarily all love each other every moment. There's going to be times when, we don't get along that well. But there has to be mutual respect. Yeah. And, I think that's the common thread, character. And it's not just restaurants or sports teams. It's everything today. Yeah. What it's missing in so many ways. There's so many shortcuts that people are taking. There's so much anger and finger pointing, and it's corrosive. Yeah. It's not constructive. And we have to get back to get back to the garden, as they said, with Woodstock. I mean,
well, talking about those traits, about like a mutual respect and everything, what do you think over the years with the Myriad Restaurant Group, as a group, but then as the restaurants individually was like a core component or pillar of the success? Because restaurants come and go all the time, but Tribeca Grill, 35 years, that doesn't just happen. Nobu, Montrachet, all these other restaurants, it doesn't just happen. There has to be something that underlies the success, the culture. What do you attribute that to, and how did you sustain it?
I think Drew, mentions it a lot in his conversations these days regarding the book and everything. A lot of it's casting. Yeah. Our mom was a radio star on a show called Let's Pretend, a child star. And then she had a lot of empathy for people working in show business. Later, she gravitated to becoming a casting director. Yeah. You try to find the right person for the right role. People would come in for auditions. They're very nervous. Yeah. She would come in there, and instead of going, next, read the line, go, she was helpful to them. Yeah. Try it this way. Try it that way. She got on their side. She made that she was a human being. Yeah. And I think there's a lot that to be said within the restaurant group. We try to hire good people. You can hire people and teach them skills. You can't teach them how to care. Yeah. So you got to find people that have that, again, that natural empathy. We get a lot of people who are servers on the way to something else. But nonetheless, when they're on the floor, they have to be, if they want to act, they can act. Yeah. But they have to provide good service.
They're present. They're there.
And, they also have to do it the way you want to do it. I remember once we had one person, just refused to do things the way we wanted to. And I happened to be dining at the restaurant, and the guy comes over, he says, tonight I have for you a blah, blah, blah. Like he has it for us, very pretentious. And, I, the server, am going to bring this to you. Yeah. And, I said to him, listen, this is not the way we present things. We don't do, hi, my name is so-and-so and all. That's not our thing. And it's not like, is everything okay? Rather, it's like, look to see if everything's okay and ask if there's anything else I can get you. Yeah. They're subtleties, but they're important. Yeah. And this particular person just couldn't do it. He was an independent operator. Well, have a good career somewhere else. You have to do it the way you want to do it. And that doesn't mean you don't listen to other people and take their suggestions. I think, we have meetings all the time going over what works, what doesn't work. But ultimately, you have to have a vision and you have to stick with it. Yeah.
Well, I think Drew's book, right? I'm Not Trying to Be Difficult, Stories from the Restaurant Trenches. It's such a great name because it really, kind of in that name tells the story of being in the restaurant trenches, not trying to be difficult, and all these interesting stories.
The thing is that a lot of times with chefs or with investors, they all have the better idea. Yeah. whatever your idea is, it's okay, but
Yeah.
our idea is better. And, sometimes that can be true,
Yeah.
but, more often than not, if you've done your homework and you do have professional knowledge, then you can have confidence in your decision making, to be well read, to be observant.
Yeah.
So today I'm not doing as much on the line, but I try to pay attention to everything that's going on in the world.
Yeah.
I try to get my news from different places, not just the same ones that I'm comfortable with, so that you have a perspective that is a good one, and that hopefully you can give advice to people that's got some value. Because that's the thing. You get older and you realize you have this lifetime of experience, and then sometimes people aren't really interested in what you have to say.
Yeah.
And that can happen,
You mentioned Tim Zagat and Joe Baum and others. What did you learn from others in the restaurant and the greater hospitality industry over the years? Are there things that you either saw or were told that help influence how you conduct yourself, how you would operate within the business?
I think that a lot of the people, there were a lot of different personalities in the restaurant business. When we would go out to eat as kids, they were almost all Europeans. They'd come out, they were sweaty, and they come out of the kitchen and how are you? And it was wonderful to meet a lot of these people. So then was one guy he'd been Eisenhower's chef during World War II. So that was a pretty good gig.
Yeah.
And then there was a place called Chez Giselle where, one night we're at dinner and my brother and I are misbehaving at the table as we were wont to do. And our parents said, "It's enough," And so we had our heads on the table, we're moping. And this older man with a Beatles haircut comes walking in and he starts going, woo, 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 woo. We look up, it's Mo Howard of the Three Stooges.
Wow.
We thought, it's Mo Howard, It's like, who's going to come across him?
Yeah.
He's with this other gentleman. We could not have been more excited if 5 presidents had walked in. We were kids.
Yeah.
We were watching it on TV all the time. Our mother was very scared that we would watch the Three Stooges and become violent. I think we understood we weren't going to hit each other with hammers.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was very gracious to us that night. He gave us a nice autograph. Each of us got a little card with an autograph. And, it reminded me of what can happen, the possibilities of restaurants. And so some of the restaurants, the owners were very, very fancy people. Sometimes they weren't. But they all had a certain worldliness to them. And they had a way of making a connection with people. And I think that, my mother with her situation, and my father connected to the industry. And
he worked for the state liquor authority.
Yeah, but, I think that's a small part of the story. I think with him, he had wonderful rapport with these people. I mean, aside from what he could help with or not help with, he had wonderful rapport. People were genuinely happy to see us because we were a nice family.
Yeah.
We didn't put demands on people. We didn't feel entitled. In my entire life, I've never felt entitled. We grew up in Peter Cooper. My brother and I shared a bedroom.
Of Manhattan.
Yeah, we shared a bedroom. I joked that I'd never had my own room because I grew up, sharing a bedroom with my brother. And then I went to college and I had roommates. And then I got married and I, have a wife, I never had my own room. I tell my kids, you had your own bedrooms and everything. I never had one,
That's pretty
so
funny.
it's just the way woe is me,
Talking about going out and like all these, formative experiences in restaurants growing up. When you go out to dinner over the years or still now, because you're in the industry, like what do you look at in other restaurants, to see what's working, what's not working, and what do you enjoy? I always find it interesting because as much as you want to go out and just enjoy a meal, you're in the business. So I have to presume you're always kind of working, thinking about like, what's going on?
Well, it's our blessing and our curse at the same time, because when you go out to somebody else's place, you want to be able to relax a little bit. I think one of the first things you look at is the greeting, whether you're getting processed when you walk in the door or whether you're being welcomed. That's a big, I know my brother doesn't like to be anonymous when he walks in the door. He wants to be known. And I always tell my my son when he goes out, let them know who you are. Because, if they see your name on the thing, maybe they'll show an extra gear of graciousness. You don't know for sure. But I find, especially when I'm dining in New Jersey where we're not necessarily as well known, that you're left to whatever's going to happen.
Yeah.
And by and large, I'm usually not disappointed. People are usually pretty professional. And then once you build some rapport, obviously, especially if you become a regular at a place, then you're treated a certain way. That my favorite restaurant is a Thai restaurant in Hackensack called Bangkok Garden. I've been going there for 30 years.
Wow.
Went there when the kids were tiny, and I love that place. And they're always gracious to us. They always send extra things. What makes
you love it so much?
I think because they're so welcoming.
Okay.
And they're generous, and they're happy to see us. And, you feel when I see our holiday card I sent to them, they put it up on the wall,
Oh, wow.
So I thought, wow, we made a connection there. And I think if you can feel at a restaurant where you're not anonymous, one of the reasons I don't care for the chains that much is you can go into a Red Lobster or a place like that 1,000,000 times and it'll be like the first time. It just, there's never any continuity because the people who work there come and go. And so, at local restaurants, you build some rapport. Yeah. So obviously you want the food to be good. I went back recently to a place called Frank's Trattoria on like 22nd Street, 21st, 22nd Street and First Avenue. I used to go there when we lived in
I know exactly. I know exactly.
Yeah, it's not a fancy place, but, and I saw the woman that I used to see, her hair's all gray now. And I wondered, how's Frank? And I asked the server, how's Frank? He said, well, he died 10 years ago. So I thought, wow, but the place is still operating. Yeah. And I thought there's something, the clams reganata were pretty good. A little spaghetti and clam sauce. Nothing too fancy, but good.
All good. Solid stuff
a good,
in a solid
meal
neighborhood restaurant.
Is a happy thing, is a happy circumstance. The hardest thing right now is being able to present a quality meal at an affordable price. Yeah. This is becoming harder and harder to do. And I don't envy this whole generation coming up now trying to figure out that equation because we have to, we can't price ourselves out of existence. But if you want quality and you want great ingredients and you want the craft of cooking and you want somebody preparing your meal who's got some education and training, you have to pay for that. Yeah. And you do in other industries, you don't go to a doctor with the least amount of experience. You want somebody who really knows what they're doing, So it's very challenging.
What do you think about the industry these days as far as, because that's obviously one of the things with hospitality lines that we're always talking about. Just obviously the cost of everything has gone up. It's a very complex and can be unforgiving regulatory environment. What do you just think about the overall, I guess, small business environment, and what kind of words of wisdom do you give to the newer generation in the industry to kind of give them some guidance and hope when they may be banging their head against the wall?
Well, it's very important to work the numbers properly, to not do things based on a whim or what might happen. You really have to have some discipline when it comes to and the rent has to be something that is manageable. Drew chose a place that was a hole in the wall in Tribeca because he could afford the rent, and then created something that was interesting enough for people to want to come off the beaten path and come see him. So that's an important thing. Don't live beyond your means. I even say that to charities that I'm involved with, that, we serve this number of meals. Now we have to expand to serve these areas. And I said, wait a minute, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to do more fundraising too. You can't, let's do what we do very well. And it will expand. The need's never going to go away.
Well, that's the same thing in the restaurant. I've said this probably on the show before is, like a good restaurant knows in its core what it does and who it is. Sometimes you go into a restaurant and it tries to be all things to all people, and it's very confusing, It's very difficult to be successful that way. And I think it goes to the core of, like you said, a nonprofit or any organization or any product really, fully understanding what it is that you do, what it is that you are offering, what you're trying to give to people and what they want and expect from you.
I think what was unusual about our group was that we did a lot of different types of concepts. Yes. Tribeca Grill is very different from Nobu, which is very different from what Montrachet was, or Cortone or Batard. Maybe we would have made more money if we had a template and we just kept following the template. That was never the interest. Yeah. It was never, it's not that you don't want to make money, but I think that the idea was that it was the creativity. What's the muse? What excites you? And to be able to bring a new type of a dining concept to people, that was always very exciting. Nobu was very different from any other kind of Japanese restaurant that existed up to that point. In the post-war period, when we were kids, people didn't want Japanese food. Japan was the enemy, coming out of World War II. Now that has changed completely. Tribeca Grill was a restaurant that had a wonderful wine list that raised it above the typical celebrity place. And Montrachet, of course, French food at a very high order, but very accessible, non-pretentious. As long as your feet and your privates were covered, it was okay.
So talking about all the restaurants, Tribeca being downtown, Tribeca Grill after 9/11, that whole area was devastated. And I know that you and Drew and others and Marty Shapiro and, went through that and were very involved in recovery efforts and serving first responders. Can you talk a little bit about that if you're comfortable with it? And just,
it was devastating in so many ways. We had a bakery, Tribakery. We baked the bread for Windows on the World, the great restaurant, in the Trade Center. And a lot of people died there. And that the Tribakery kind of died with them because after that, the business was not viable because people couldn't pay the bills. But beyond, the human cost is the thing that's the most important. And we just felt if we could do what we could do to help people during a moment of immense pain, there's no template to explain how you should behave or even the risks that you would run being in an area where it wasn't very healthy. We're all kind of paying for it now all these years later with different medical conditions. And it is what it is. I don't think it would have changed anything. In this coming year, I've become very friendly over the years with Darlene Dwyer, who was the head of Windows of Hope, which was the organization that basically served the food service workers in the Trade Center, Windows on the World and all the other places that worked there. All these people suffered grievous losses. And they needed a lot of hand-holding and a lot of help moving forward with their families, with a lot of things, healthcare, education. It was an enormous job. But it brought people together on a very human level. She's trying to put together a documentary now that goes back to that time. And also we're going to do a podcast that I'm going to help host that's going to talk to people that were involved and talk about their motivations and the experiences that they had, really so that we can look at this, connect this on a human level. The one thing that comes out of this is that people treated each other very decently in that period. Nobody cared about whether you were a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or conservative or, that was secondary. We were all Americans. We'd suffered this terrible blow and we were trying to recover from it collectively. And I remember it was like in the city, it was very quiet and hushed, people would break for you. No, you walk first, Cab would stop, no, you should. I mean, it didn't last too long, but while it lasted, it was like the graciousness was amazing because we were all kind of in shock. And I think now we're coming up on 25 years. Boy, where does the time go? But I think if we can bring back some of that feeling and have some of those conversations, I think it'd be good for people to look back. We look back at so many things. We look back at the violent aspect of it and the cruelty of it. But out of that came tremendous humanity and just care, empathy. Those are the most important ingredients we have as human beings. You start to realize that more and more as you get further on with your life and you realize that things are not inevitably going to go for years and years and years, that the runway gets shorter. And I'm very conscious of that. And I'm also conscious that so many people there had so much to look forward to in their lives that was taken away from them.
So true.
And we can never forget that. We can never forget what was taken from them. So we honor them by remembering them and also remembering the acts of heroism or the acts just of good citizenship that happened in its wake.
And selflessness. And
if that's something we can bring forward, in everything now, just take a time out and say, okay, we've gone this path of, being at loggerheads with everybody. Let's figure out a way that we can quiet the rhetoric a little bit. We don't have to win every argument. We don't have to win every battle, but we have to collectively figure out how to score the most points.
Words of wisdom. I mean, after nine, you said there was this moment of unity after 9/11, but then all of a sudden it becomes us against them and this and that. Even during the pandemic, more recently, there was this kind of, I don't know if it's a beautiful moment, but there was this moment of unity when we're all in this together at the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah. But then you started to see, it's splintering, and, you question the science, which side are you on, the mandates, the this, the that, and, how do we harness that beauty and that togetherness and that collectiveness?
Remember, people would start playing music at a certain point.
Yeah, we had a very famous singer in my neighborhood that he would sing opera, and we would come from all around the neighborhood every night, to cheer for the first responders, and he would sing, and, everyone would bang the pots and pans out the windows, so it's how do we gain those moments? And I do think that our restaurant industry is what brings it together, because, it's like building longer tables. Jose Andres always says, how do you bring people together to accomplish great things, to have difficult conversations? And I think they can happen, in the restaurant industry. And, in that same kind of theme, what do you think at this point, in your career and all of this experience in the industry, what's the most important, impactful thing that you've learned from years in the New York City restaurant industry that, that sticks with you, that influences who you are as a person?
Well, I think, be resilient. I think that's the most important thing, because you're going to face disappointments. Yeah. Sometimes a place isn't going to be successful as some of the other places. Not every place ends up being Nobu. They all start with the same building blocks in terms of good thinking. Mm-hmm. Some are accepted better than others. But you have to have courage of your convictions, and you have to just be able to get up. Yeah. And, it's not just that. It's now, I've always tried to be a good father. My wife and I are going to celebrate our 50th anniversary next year.
Oh, actually, congratulations.
This year, yeah. And so that's an accomplishment. I have 2, great-grandchildren. That's where I put a lot of my time and attention, and I have great pride, because, they're going to see a world and a future that I'll never be able to see. But at least I can be there at the very beginning to help build the foundation. And maybe they'll remember us like, hey, I remember we used to do this with grandma and grandpa. And all. And it's interesting. My grandchildren are part Chinese and part Jewish. So, we're hoping that things go in the right direction, and we don't have to decide on which internment camp they, we go Chinese for the food. There's no doubt about that, But I mean, I hate to joke about things like that, but the fact is that what I've taken out of restaurants is just that it's a wonderful business to be in. If you care about people and you care about your employees and you care about your guests, there's nothing better than that. But be realistic that it's not easy. It's tough. A lot of sweat equity, a lot of long hours. You have to be resilient. You have to be in it for the long haul, and you can't be in it just because you want to make money, because you have to genuinely love it. If you don't love it, it's probably going to be very onerous to continue on. So, and it's also, it's a young person's game in many ways, especially if you're physically going to be in a kitchen, on the floor, in a hot thing, on your feet and everything. It's not easy. It's very much like athletics. You have that window of time where you can perform on a high level, and then you have to kind of move to the side a little bit, use everything that you know from your neck up, and have that be the driving force as much more so than the physical aspect.
Yeah. All right. And as far as the restaurants go, now Tribeca Grill is closed. What's any plans over the next couple of years for you? Just like you said, it sounds like family, friends.
Nobu is still, doing very well, and so we're very proud of that. It doesn't need a whole lot of attention, to be honest with you. You try to make suggestions here and there, and the Daily Burger at Madison Square Garden. There's a wine and spirit store on 57th Street. So these are things that are, I like being on the board at NYC Tourism. I'm I'm on the Food Council of City Harvest. I've been involved with Table to Table in New Jersey. So these are things. I don't want to go to a million meetings now, but if things to keep this podcast, I think, for 9/11 will be interesting. And I just, if anybody, needs some advice or needs somebody I'd like to do more media things. I enjoy talking with people. I often thought maybe some kind of a podcast or maybe a radio show.
Should do
Then
it.
again,
Listen, you're enjoyable
I don't want to be up at
guest.
3 a.m. necessarily, but I years ago I met this guy Lionel. He's got the show on WABC now from 1 to 5 in the morning. He's had a career for a long time, but I don't know. I don't want to be on in the middle of the night from 1 to 5 in the morning. I just like to do it in smaller doses, but I do enjoy talking to people. This has been such an honor to be here with you, to watch you as you've come up through your career, going back to the
association.
The association, the New York State Restaurant Association, and all these years now with the Hospitality Alliance, and really making it a meaningful, important part of the fabric of restaurants in New York. It wasn't just something that came along and to collect dues. It was to basically really make change and keep people's feet to the fire. And there's a lot to be said for that.
I appreciate that.
I have tremendous respect and admiration for you on so many levels. And I just want to say, you're doing everything the right way. And it's on a base of integrity. And that's the most important thing. You articulate things beautifully. And you're dealing with a lot of craziness because dealing with restaurants is like herding cats, it's like, okay, everybody's got a strong opinion in politics, and especially, there's so many vested interests right out here and right now, and they all have their, they're all very self-righteous. In fact, I joke about that. My brother and I, if we started a rock group, we'd be the Self-Righteous Brothers.
I like it. Well, listen, that's very heartfelt. Tracy, you mean a lot to me. You've been there since day one of the Alliance, but going back before that with the association and just so many levels. And that's really why we have the Hospitality Alliance and why I do and we do the work that we do, because it's people like you and Drew, and I mentioned Marty and the rest of the team and so many others that really are so important to the fabric of New York. Food, restaurants, nightlife, culture, all of those things that make life worth living is produced by you and so many others. And to have people like you in my, corner and, sharing those kind words really, really means the world and fills my tank. So I thank you.
We are the world.
I won't even try to sing. This is Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I am Andrew Ridgey. My incredible guest, my friend, Tracy Nieporent, who is a partner and the director of marketing at the Myriad Restaurant Group. I'm sure we'll be talking sports, food, and a lot more soon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.